Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter but not the spirit of request. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. The first story: be rude and call me girly, and I'll follow alcohol sales rules to the letter. No beer for you. The second story: manager called me to work when I was sick. The clients didn't like it. The third story: I put on a funny shirt because my shirt was transparent. On to the first story. No beer for you. This happened quite a long while ago when I was bartending and waiting tables in a small bar and family restaurant in Virginia. In Virginia, the ABC board controls all alcohol sales and has some rather strict enforcement around proper ID for alcohol sales. If you serve someone unlawfully, either underage or without proper ID, the business incurred a fine or a suspended license if it's been several violations, and the individual that sold to the customer would get a personal fine as well. I think it was around $1,000 or $1,200. I'm not up on current laws, so they may have changed in the 20-ish years since I last had to deal with them. It's also possible that some of these restrictions were partly company policy. It's been a while. Anyway, proper ID meant it had to be intact, not expired, and most importantly, present at the bar. It was a rural area where I grew up in, so I knew how to be pretty annoying to some of the older-than-me gentlemen that came in. A guy around 40 and his family was seated at a big round table in the bar area. Wife and 3 to 4 kids. I remember the kids were pretty young, so I'm already judging for having the kids in the smoking and bar area. It was still legal to smoke indoors then. I'm also pretty annoyed as it's a college bar, sports bar vibe, on a Sunday afternoon, and they were taking up a valuable table in the bar area that I would have otherwise had a table of drinkers that would most likely tip better and require less work. That aside, I got up, and I'm nice to everyone because of tips. Go up and say hi. Dude immediately barks at me to get his game on the bar TVs, not even pretending to be pleasant, and calls me girly, which makes me see red immediately. I grew up with too much of that redneck patronizing kind of BS, and that particular term has always filled me with rage. I know I'm not getting jack for a tip because I'm girly, and I know this type of guy. When he asks to order a pitcher, I ask for ID. We were told if they looked over 30, we didn't have to ask, but as it was our fine too, we could always ask if we felt the need. It's a pretty petty bit of annoyance, but it was one of the few powers I had to be annoying, and not be doing anything wrong in my job. Usually it just means they have to fish their wallet out or possibly go to their car to get it. I always made the annoying ones remove it from the holder, and if I lucked out, it was one with a clingy clear window that took them a few minutes to get it out. Like I said, petty as hell, but he called me girly. He doesn't have his ID. This is where malicious compliance comes in. I asked this guy that was obviously over the legal drinking age of 21 to be a little annoying, but now that he can't provide it, I must adhere to the letter of the law and won't serve him. I tell him I can't serve him, and tell him legally I can't, now that I've asked for ID and he can't prove it. He throws a fit, says he'll go up the road to a pizza place that had beer, and how I'm losing out and he wants to talk to my manager. Tables nearby are giving him the stink eye. Manager is kind of annoyed but backs me because as we're in a small college town, we're really strict, as the business would die if the ABC or liquor license was suspended or revoked, and as a server I have the right to refuse, as it's my behind on the line as well. I would speculate that we would have never received a violation if we had a walk-in compliance check, unless we were on the hit list that week, but for him I do everything perfectly by the book. I actually felt slightly bad, because the kids seemed disappointed to leave, but it was on him at that point, since its pitcher of beer was more important than his family eating where they wanted. A rude customer is a frequent occurrence. I sympathize with the employees who have to behave politely and professionally, because with my temperament I could not work in the service sector, but I have an aunt who worked in a fast food restaurant. A similar story happened to her. My aunt has a very strong character and she definitely won't let herself be hurt. She told us about how her shift went. 2 male friends came into the restaurant. They were being rude and called her to take their order. As they ordered, one of them added the words, "Hurry up, B." She didn't want to make a tantrum and attract the attention of the other customers, so she went up to him and said, "Do you see that big bald guy? If I see you in this restaurant in 3 minutes, that guy will show you where the exit is." 5 minutes later, my aunt came out into the hall and those guys were gone. It turned out that this bald guy was a regular customer who didn't suspect anything. She tells this story every time when she comes to our house for the holidays, and even though we've heard it a lot, she makes us laugh every time. The next story is, manager wants me to come in sick. So I've been sick for the past few days. I have a fairly intensive cold that has left me with little sleep, and some difficulties breathing when laying down. I figured I should get a doctor's note, so I went to urgent care. Minute Clinic wasn't taking walk-ins due to COVID traffic. Doctor says I have a viral infection in my upper sinuses and upper respiratory regions. Not the lack of a specific diagnosis because it comes into play. I work as a delivery driver at a chain pizza place, which means I frequently handle food and could be a danger to customers if contagious. I send a text to my GM, general manager, and he says don't worry about it. You deserve a few extra days off anyways. I feel at this point that I can rest easy for a few days until I feel better. But in comes my DM, district manager, who wants to know when I'll be able to come back into work. My doctor's note doesn't give a day by which I must come back in and just says, until symptoms have passed. So I tell her I don't know. She says that she'll be taking me off the schedule for next week, and that I should call and let her know when I can work again. I tell her that I will and go back to sleep. DM calls again later that night to inform me that she has in fact changed her mind and is putting me back on the schedule. My sinuses are feeling a little better, but my sore throat and cough have gotten much worse, so I still feel that it would be irresponsible of me to go be a contagion at a restaurant. She must have been doing the schedule because she informs me that if I do not come in that night, she will have to cover my shifts for the week, and that we were delivering in the cold rain last night, so we're probably all going to get colds anyway. She says that since my note doesn't have a specific diagnosis on it, that it's not a big deal if I come in anyways. Now I would almost feel bad for her having to cover my shift, if it weren't for the fact that she was the one responsible for driving away all our employees by being such an insufferable A, in the middle of a jobs market, where every employer is desperate for workers. Cue malicious compliance. I decided that if she's going to try and make this my problem instead of hers, that I'm going to make it as much her problem as humanly possible. I stopped taking all my cough medicines and down a few sodas, so that the acidic drink can ravage my larynx. I go to sleep that night coughing up a lung and a half, barely able to shut my eyes. I get up the next morning and receive a call from DM checking to make sure I'm coming in today. I told her in my now hoarse, rattly voice that I could come in today, but that I would need her to give me a written signed notice, stating that she was ordering me to ignore my doctor's note, saying that I was unfit to work. To my surprise, she agreed. My plan wasn't actually legal action, but rather to have both that note and doctors on hand while on deliveries. When customers would ask the obviously sick, hacking, coughing delivery girl if she was alright, I would simply tell them no, and I have a doctor's note saying as much as well. But I also have this note from my manager saying to disregard the doctor's note, and that I'm fit to handle your food. As our store didn't require masks for vaccinated employees, nobody but me was wearing a mask that day when I walked in with my doctor's note and inhaler. I guess DM must have either wised up or talked to her higher-ups, because she was singing a very different tune when I walked in the door. No longer is it come in because I'll have to cover your shifts if you don't. Instead it was, oh, I just needed you to come in so I could ensure you had a doctor's note. I had already sent an image of it to the GM. You don't have to stay today. You should go home and get some rest. I of course reminded her that she would have to cover my shifts, to which she was now saying she didn't mind, that I should drink some warm tea and honey for the nasty cough I was sporting. So here I am at home now in my bed writing this all down before I sleep and forget all the details. I soon learned from a colleague that DM had been demoted. A couple of days later I went to work and she was not at the workplace. My assumption about how it all happened. 1. Customer began to complain that their food was brought by a sick person. 2. Too many complaints and the GM found out about it. 3. GM called the DM and talked to her. 4. DM changed her attitude and position towards you. You did the right thing when you took notes from her. After that you had proof and she couldn't lie. E.g. that you decided to come to work yourself when you were sick. In Europe, if the doctor gives you a note that you're sick and have to stay at home, the manager can't order someone to come. The doctor's note outweighs any argument the employer can legally make. And second, the fact that the manager is forcing you to come to work even though you have a doctor's note could be a penalty for the manager. Labor court will gut the employer. She's lucky she didn't get fired, but I think one more misdemeanor like that and she'll lose her job. She's also lucky she didn't get a fine or worse, an invitation to court. I'm glad you were able to stay home after all, and wish you a speedy recovery. The last story is, you want me to wear a see-through shirt? Gladly. When I was 15, I started working for a particular clown who owns a fast food restaurant. When I first started working, the manager assumed I was 16, and I was given a red polo shirt to wear during my shifts. There was a hierarchy to the shirts at this restaurant. White was for anyone 15 and younger. You got a red shirt once you were 16 or over. Black shirts were for crew trainers, and the full button-down shirts were for managers. All the shirts were made of a decent fabric except for the white shirt, which was very thin and practically see-through. About a month after I started working there, the manager called me into her office and asked why I had lied to her about my age. I told her I had never once said to her that I was only 15, so I never really lied about it. She told me I had to hand in my red shirt and exchange it for a white one, which I did. I wore the white one for about a week, and that's when I noticed after the first wash the fabric became even thinner, and the shirt was practically see-through. As a heavy-set individual, if I were not wearing an undershirt, you would have seen all of my hairy, manly glory underneath this sorry excuse of a shirt. I asked, since I had already been wearing a red shirt for a month, and the shirt colors really don't mean much, could I get my old red shirt back? I was told that it was company policy to follow the shirt rules, and I was denied my old red shirt. Cue the MC. There was a rule stating I had to wear my see-through company-issued shirt for all my shifts. There was no rule stating what I had to wear underneath. My dad had recently returned from Mexico and had brought me the most touristy shirt from his trip. There were 4 panels on this shirt. The first had a worm and a shot that said 1 tequila. The second, the same worm, second shot, much drunker and said 2 tequila. The third, the same worm, third shot, very drunk and said 3 tequila. And as I'm sure you have deducted, the fourth is the worm passed out and it says floor. I decided this was the perfect undershirt for a 15-year-old register worker at the Clown to wear underneath his see-through shirt. I wore it for 1 shift before the manager came up to me. She told me how much she didn't appreciate the fact that I wore such a vulgar shirt underneath my work uniform. I politely told her nobody would know what I was wearing underneath my company-issued work shirt if they weren't see-through. When I went to clock out that day, they had a brand new unused red polo waiting just for me. I was told to wear the red shirt from that point forward, and to turn in my white shirts. Edit. I had other shirts lined up in case this one didn't do the trick. A friend of mine worked for the King across the parking lot. I had one of their shirts ready to go. LOL. OP, you got your revenge on all the employees who wear white t-shirts. It was a funny and brave deed. I just can't understand why the red shirts are made of good fabric, and the white ones are made of sheer fabric. Why can't white t-shirts be made from the same fabric as the red ones? Do customers like to look at employees who can see what's underneath their shirts? What about girls? I think the owner of this restaurant needs to do something right now. I used to work in a bakery, and one time my manager tried to get me to change into white bakery underwear. But the thing is, I wasn't wearing a tank top. She said it would be fine, but I flatly refused. I'm surprised I didn't get written up for refusing, because she was furious. But I wasn't going to work an entire shift with my bright green bra on display. Subscribe, hit the like button, and have a good day.